I just wanted to talk about some of these Canadian Army helmets that I've accumulated. I picked up this one recently. It's got a camo paint job on it, which I'm not sure if that's contemporary with its service or if some kid put that on it back in the 50s or 60s when these were cheap. This helmet's been around. It's definitely seen service. See if you can see the... I don't know if this one has a maker stamp in it or not. I think this is actually one of the unstamped shells. You do occasionally find these that have nothing in them, like nothing on them for markings, and those are, I believe the consensus was that those unmarked shells were made by GSW, and they were thought to be ones that didn't pass inspection for some reason and weren't marked, but I'm not really sure about that because I have seen them that appear to have seen service, but I'm not 100% certain on that. This one, this is a post-war repaint. You can tell by the color. It's a semi-gloss olive drab that the Canadian Army used in the 50s, and it's not really widely known, I think, but these helmets were still being worn when my truck was in service. They were still a going concern. I believe around 1960 we upgraded to the M1 helmet, and 1970, 72-ish, I think the militia finally upgraded. But I don't think this one has anything in it either. I don't see anything. This one has an unusually large liner. It's a size 7 3/4, which is almost never seen. They're almost always like 7 1/8, 6 3/4, 6 7/8. So they all, I guess, Canadian soldiers in those days must have had really small heads, or maybe not many did have small heads. That's why there's an abundance of small liners today. But this one has, you can see it's an unusually large liner. And the chin strap is unfortunately broken on this one. And we have, don't want them to fall down. We have this one here. This one's nicely stamped. I haven't even cleaned this one yet. As you can see, GSW. And these are marked as a Mark 1, but they're actually Mark 2s. I don't know why GSW marked them as Mark 1s. 1941, still has its original chin strap, the original pad inside. And this is actually the original paint job. This is like the World War II vintage paint. It has a dent in the top. And this is probably contemporary to the helmet service. Quite often they would reverse the screw. The screw usually comes in from the top and the nut is on the bottom, but this one's the other way around. Apparently that was quite often done when guys had the net on because it was easier to take the liner out. But that's a good example. GSW is still in business today. They make hot water heaters, garbage cans, buckets, and that sort of thing. This one, this has a scrim net on it. And this particular helmet, I believe this one's made by Canadian Lamp or Canadian Motor Lamp. CLC 1942. And I always see these, they're always calling them Brody helmets. They aren't Brody helmets. The Brody helmet was used for a very short period in the First World War, and it was replaced by the Mark I helmet. Both the Mark I and the Brody are perfectly round. These Mark II helmets are oval shaped. The Brody helmet has a raw edge. It doesn't have this rim on it. And the liner is completely different. Calling these a Brody helmet would be akin to calling your 2023 Toyota Tacoma a Hilux. Or even worse, a Land Cruiser. Like, the lineage is there, but they are most definitely not Brody helmets. And the philosophy behind these at the time was like they were to deflect shrapnel, and there seems to be a misunderstanding. You constantly say, "Oh, they were there to stop shell fragments from above," but it wasn't for shell fragments. It was for shrapnel, and shrapnel is a completely different thing. I'll see if I can find you an example here. I think I have. Yeah, right here. That's shrapnel. So shrapnel is an actual ball of lead. So during artillery bombardments in the First World War and the Second World War and so on, they would have the shrapnel shells would explode. They're basically like a shotgun shell. They're fused to explode in the air. So these things would rain down on the enemy and kill men and horses, anybody who happened to be out in the open. So naturally, the majority of these coming from above would cause head wounds. So the idea behind the steel helmet was that they would deflect shrapnel. And they actually had a special gun for testing these. It fired a 50 caliber lead ball at a certain velocity that was supposed to be the same as a shrapnel ball. So they would test them. They would test random batches and make sure that the ball bounced off. These are not made to protect you from rifle fire. You probably shoot through these with a 22. But they'll keep you safe from shrapnel for sure. And under the right circumstances, they could even protect you from a rifle shot. So later on, there's cat fur on here because my cat was scratching herself on the helmet. But this is a Mark IV helmet. It's post-war. It's basically the same as the Mark III helmet that was issued during the Second World War. I believe the 3rd Canadian Division got these. And they never completely replaced the Mark II helmet, but they're starting to see more use toward the end of the war for sure. A lot of Canadians wore them. This has the two-tone Canadian helmet net on that these apparently cost a fortune now. These used to be $10 a piece, brand new, and $5 used when I started collecting. And I tried to find one now. Like you look on eBay and they want like $75 for a net. It's just unreal. But this is the post-war version. They upgraded the design later on, so it's closed at the top. They don't have the screw holding the liner in anymore. It has a lift, the dot fastener. You were supposed to be able to use these as a water bucket. But Canada used these during the Second World War. And at the end of the war, they were given back to Britain. And then at some point during the Korean War, I'm not sure if we actually bought them from Britain or if they were supplied by the British or what. But you do see this helmet in service a lot during the Korean War with our Canadian soldiers, but you never see any pictures of them wearing them in Canada. So I'm guessing that they were probably supplied by the British, just like they were during the Second World War, and then returned to British stores at the end of the Korean War. But for the most part, our guys continued to wear the old Mark II helmet right through the Korean War. And we also had the M1 helmets. Again, this one's got cat fur on it, thanks to my cat. But this is a fairly late Canadian issue M1. And same helmet that the Americans wore. We actually had these as far back as the Second World War. I believe there were about 250,000 of them were purchased, Canada was supposed to adopt this helmet, and I think it was something to do with because the British handsets for field telephones and radios and whatnot weren't compatible with this style of helmet because it comes too close to the ears. So they chose to go with the Mark III style of helmet. The Mark III helmet's a decent enough helmet anyway, so I don't think they were really missing out on too much by going with the Mark III. It offers decent protection. The M1 is definitely the better helmet though, and because they weren't going to issue them to combat troops, what ended up happening, they went, I believe they transferred a lot of them to Pacific Command, and you'll see pictures of the guys on, like, say, York Island, the fortress that they had there, and various coastal defense installations in BC. You'll quite often see the guys wearing these American style helmets, which really looks out of place. Like, when you see people wearing British style uniforms, you just automatically assume that they're going to be wearing this style of helmet, right? So it's kind of strange to see Canadians wearing them, and our guys also wore them when they went to the Aleutians as well. But they were adopted by the Canadian Army in 1960, and the militia started getting these around 1970, and then they finally retired the old World War II helmets at that time. But these are getting really hard to find. This type of helmet, they're just not out there like they used to be. When I started collecting these things, what was I? I was just a teenager at the time, but I remember you could buy them, and it seemed pretty expensive at the time, but I wasn't making much money either. And I think they were like $20 or something. And like I said, you could buy these nets brand new, like mint condition, unissued, for $10. And the used ones were $5, and they look new anyway. And I had a whole bunch of these helmets. I gave some of them away, and I sold a couple, and I kind of wish I'd kept them all now. I only ever had the one Mark IV helmet. These always seem to be kind of hard to find in Canada for some reason, I guess because we never really issued them within the country. But they're really not a loved helmet at all. Like, people don't like the look of them. And I kind of understand that, but they are a decent helmet. Like, they give you fairly good protection to the sides of the head, and they give you a decent protection to the back of the neck as well. You can tip it back when you're prone. It protects the neck really well when you're shooting from the prone position. Doesn't really get in the way of anything either. And it doesn't impede your hearing. The German helmet that everybody thinks is the coolest thing on earth is probably the absolute worst helmet for impeding your vision and your hearing. And I would think that in a battlefield situation it would be fairly important to preserve your hearing. Yet the other thing is the German helmet tends to catch the noise from rifle fire and funnel it into your ears when you're shooting too, which is really undesirable. This type of helmet, well, like I said, they give you protection from shrapnel, period. I suppose they have their good points. I mean, you can put it on your head at a sideways angle and look stylish. They are a classic for sure. No collection is complete without one of these. But the other thing a lot of people don't realize about these too is that they're non-magnetic, and this is actually a rim of stainless steel around the edge. So they're a manganese steel, which is non-magnetic, and that was very important because especially for officers when they're using a compass or something, you don't want to have a magnetic helmet. so it would throw your compass right off. So it was considered to be of utmost importance. There's also another variant of this helmet out there that was made for civil defense, and they don't have the rivets holding the chin strap lugs on there. They're actually spot welded in place, and they're magnetic, or at least most of them are. Some of the ones that I've seen are definitely non-magnetic, but for the most part they are made out of a regular steel that wasn't a combat grade type of steel. And I think, don't quote me on it, but I think the British used a helmet for civil defense. I think that theirs were combat grade shells that had flaws or defects, so they drilled holes in them, like a hole here or a couple holes or whatever, to signify what grade of steel or what grade of defect they had, and then they were painted up for civil defense with like ARP or whatever on them. But in Canada we actually had helmets made specifically for civil defense. They were under contract to the Department of Pensions and Health, I think, DP&H. And if I remember right, they were made by GSW, General Steelwares. But an interesting piece of Canadian history anyway. And like I said, I usually like to display one of these Mark II helmets with the truck, because my truck is in the markings that it carried in the mid-50s. And these helmets were very much a going concern in Canada at that time, so it's appropriate to have that type of helmet in this truck. This is a M1 helmet. This has the later cover. Now there's some controversy whether this cover is Canadian or American. I'm not sure. I've seen similar ones in US service and Canadian service. I do know it's relatively rare to have the olive green cover. I also have a Mitchell cover that goes with it. And a lot of them in Canadian service had the same two-tone brown and green net as I have on the Mark IV helmet. But this net, for some reason, doesn't want to fit this helmet very well at all. Maybe you have to soak it in water or something. But it's nice to have that as well, because then I get to show people the things from different eras. But I'm really happy with this collection. I picked these up at a garage sale lately. This one, and the painted one for a fairly decent price. They all have defects, but I had enough parts and things at home to make them whole again. I really like this one because it has the post-war repaint, which is the right time period that goes with my truck. It's that's kind of a step backwards that Canada decided to paint everything in a semi-gloss paint, but from what I understand, the idea behind that was it was easier to decontaminate the glossy paint in chemical warfare than it would have been if it was flat. That's why they went away from the textured finish on helmets as well. But it's definitely a nice little collection to have. Goes with my truck really well. Oh well, I hope my 3 or 4 viewers that I have enjoyed this video, and I'm going to put everything back away and go have a cup of tea, I think.